With the breakthrough in my negotiations in Hanoi and with Cambodia on POW/MIA accounting, and the collapse of the Soviet Union, the fear in Beijing and Hanoi of communism being under assault, the negotiating atmosphere coming to an agreement about Indochina was greatly enhanced, and a lot of progress was made in 1992 in the Perm Five negotiations. And we're putting together and writing essentially what would be an interim constitution for Cambodia, an election law for the UN transition organization, which would be known as UNTAC. And plans are being developed about human rights concerns and how an election would be held and administered by the UN. But there was one other development, seemed like a small development at the time, but which became a very significant development. And early on in the process, Secretary Baker made the judgment that at the United Nations itself, the United States would break with what we had been doing for over a decade. We had been supporting the coalition of parties that were against the Cambodian People's Party, run by a man named Hun Sen, and we would no longer support that coalition of parties that included the Khmer Rouge holding the Cambodian seat at the UN. And the UN representative had in fact been a Khmer Rouge. And when we did that, it upset the Chinese because they believed we were tilting towards the Vietnamese, and who were allied with the Soviets, who the Chinese feared. But at the same time, it pleased the Vietnamese greatly. And in every meeting I had with every Vietnamese official from Hanoi, I always started by saying, Mr. Minister, Mr. Vice Minister, we both have as our policy goal never ever allowing the Khmer Rouge to come back in power in Cambodia. And since the Khmer Rouge had killed Vietnamese civilians, the Vietnamese were all in favor of that policy. It set a very different tone in all of my discussions. So we're moving ahead at the Perm Five. We're creating the structure for a peacekeeping force. We're creating an election law that will determine how the election will take place. We're in active negotiation and planning with the UN peacekeeping operation run by an Undersecretary General of the UN named Kofi Annan, who had actually been criticized significantly about UN peacekeeping in Rwanda, where they had a genocide. But Kofi Annan would do a great job in planning the UN peacekeeping force for Cambodia. The US government, the US Air Force, would play a big role in that whole peacekeeping. We would fly the Bulgarians and the other troops donated to the peacekeeping effort by UN member states. US Air Force would fly those troops to Cambodia. And we were coming to the final agreement that would be in Paris at the Avenue Kléber Conference Center. The President of France would be there. We'd be at the table with Secretary Baker for the signing of this agreement about bringing peace to Cambodia that no one in 1990, no one had thought was possible. Ambassador Dick Solomon, my boss, the Assistant Secretary, one of the few people who believed it. I had worked on it We had pulled all of these pieces together, kept everyone there for the signing ceremony. What an incredible moment it was. I was there at the table next to Secretary Baker as he's signing the document as it's brought around to the Perm Five members and then the other Cambodian members there. It would start the process that would lead to an actual election in Cambodia in 1993, and because this was an essential part of our roadmap policy, at the same time, we were now going to be able to take steps with Vietnam to establish offices, diplomatic offices in Hanoi. The Vietnamese could have diplomatic office in Washington, D.C., and what had seemed mission impossible, what had seemed difficult, all these various elements, all these different countries, all these different Cambodian parties, we had somehow knitted it all together. And we're going towards now this decisive moment in May of '93 to have an election, UN-supervised election, overseen by a Japanese official of the UN, Yasushi Akashi, large UN peacekeeping force. The UN was doing something amazing, restoring peace, restoring the relationships of countries to the country of Cambodia, reopening it, giving it a chance to be reborn. Country whose culture had almost been eradicated by the Khmer Rouge was now put together again and going to be back on the world stage. It's a great, great diplomatic moment.